Good morning, everyone. I thought I would demonstrate my new Caltech face mask to all of you, and greetings from my favorite coffee shop here in Pasadena. I hope you're all well. I know it's certainly smoky and fiery, and many people are challenged, but hopefully today and tomorrow will be a bit of a pick-me-up for all of you. I'd like to say it's great to see you, and I wish I could, but we're going to make the best of it today. At the insistence of my wife, I put on a nice pressed shirt, though I have to confess I'm still wearing my pajamas, but I won't demonstrate that. I'm Andy Wilson. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Alliance for Southern California Innovation. We are producers of this event with our partners at LAVA, and also I want to acknowledge the great support from our lead sponsor, Alexandria Real Estate, and Sarah in particular. As many of you know, the First Look Showcase is an annual conference celebrating the best early-stage teams commercializing deep technology and life sciences from Southern California's top research universities and institutions. Historically, this has been a great gathering in person. Of course, the pandemic has changed all that, so we're going virtual for the first time, so bear with us. This is a new adventure for all of us. We're excited to be here. I did want to mention in the course of the day, there is a Q&A option in Zoom. And so as we're having conversations and you want to submit questions, I would encourage you to submit them in the Q&A box on Zoom. Please feel free to use chat to connect amongst yourselves. I wish we could be networking over the coffee pot, but perhaps next year. Before we jump into the program today, I thought I would just spend a few minutes introducing you all to what the Southern California Alliance is. We're a not-for-profit organization. We were formed a few years ago, and we're really focused on bringing together what I call the heft of Southern California, the top research universities, which is the focus of today, private sector organizations. We have a wonderful set of corporate partners, several of them represented today with Alexandria and Wilson Sonsini. Obviously, entrepreneurs are a very important part of our ecosystem as well. And our goal is to bring those pieces together to further stimulate the Southern California innovation ecosystem. Our goal here at the Alliance is, I'd like to say, is to both engage and unify Southern California's compelling diversity of talent, ideas, perspectives, in order to improve the conditions for Southern California innovators to bring breakthroughs to the world. And so, boy, do we need breakthroughs more so than ever. That's our mission. We do that by connecting the diverse communities that define Southern California. We know we're not all one place. We're all doing extraordinary things, and we think we have many things to offer. So we're trying to work locally as well. We think there's opportunities collectively to elevate the Southern California brand in innovation and engage more venture capital into our ecosystem. And finally, enhance the usability of what's happening here. It's an amazing place, but it's very diverse and very distributed, and often it's difficult to navigate. Leading corporations also work closely with the Alliance to understand how to best engage in the ecosystem. And our goal ultimately, obviously, is elevating entrepreneurs and key innovators, but we hope job creation will be an important byproduct of our work. We hope that ultimately that we can bring 100,000 direct jobs to Southern California and ultimately 500,000 indirect jobs. And given the circumstances of today's economy, we think that priority is more important than ever. Like all successful not-for-profits, we depend greatly on the committed leadership of our volunteer board. We've asked our amazing Vice Chair, Julie Hill, to help get today rolling. Let me briefly introduce Julie. Julie is an impressive person, and we feel so privileged to have her on our board. She was the CEO of the U.S. division of Constain, which is based in London, but interesting enough is a heavy engineering and construction company where she ran the U.S. land and development and home building business. She's an entrepreneur. She started her own land development business after leaving Constain. She serves on a number of boards, including Lendlease, based out of Sydney, Anthem, the healthcare space, and Lord Abbott. Importantly to us, she chairs the UCI Board of Trustees. UCI is one of our many partners in the UC system, and she blends a number of philanthropic and not-for-profit organizations and very involved in the Alliance. We're grateful for that support. Despite her somewhat conservative demeanor, she's also a bit of a thrill seeker. She was one of the early signups to go into space on Virgin Galactic. She invited me actually to be one of her personal guests next year in New Mexico as she goes on her space journey. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Julie Hill to formally welcome you to today's conference.
Good morning. My name is Julie Hill, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Alliance for Socal Innovation. It's my pleasure to welcome you today for the start of 2 days of fascinating presentations and panels. The First Look Socal Innovations Showcase is an annual presentation of the best early stage teams commercializing tech and life science breakthroughs from the top research institutions in Southern California. This is the premier platform for deep tech startups to connect with top-tier investors and successful serial entrepreneurs with expertise to help them leap from the lab to the market. The day's program will feature a short keynote before a full program of quick pitch presentations. We will have 15 today and 15 tomorrow, and each will be followed by investor-led Q&A. Each day ends with a panel discussion of investors and industry leaders. I'd like to first thank our sponsors, Alexandria Real Estate Equities and Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich, and Rosati. I now have the pleasure of introducing you to your keynote speaker. Dr. Ajay Nirula, MD, PhD, is Vice President, Immunology for Lilly Research Laboratories, based at the Lilly Biotechnology Center in San Diego. Dr. Narula joined Lilly in 2015 and is responsible for discovery research and early phase clinical development in immunology. Prior to joining Lilly, Dr. Narula had held leadership positions at Amgen and Biogen IDEC and was involved in several research programs and regulatory filings spanning diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, and vasculitis. Dr. Narula earned his undergraduate degree in molecular biology from UC Berkeley, his MD from the UCLA School of Medicine, and his PhD from the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School. He subsequently joined the faculty in the Division of Rheumatology at UCSF Medical Center, conducting research in T-cell signal transduction. He has been a board member at the Vasculitis Foundation and continues to serve on the foundation's research committee. He has published extensively in scientific literature in journals such as New England Journal of Medicine, Nature Immunology, and the Journal of Experimental Medicine. He and his wife have 4 children. Welcome, Dr. Narula.
Yeah, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Let me go ahead and share some slides that I have. Perfect, good. Well, thanks for the kind introduction, and thanks to Andy and the Alliance of Southern California Innovation for inviting me to speak today. As was noted, I'm the head of the immunology therapeutic area for Eli Lilly, so I head up a large team of discovery scientists and clinicians across our sites in Indianapolis, our headquarters, but I think more relevant today in San Diego, which is Eli Lilly's West Coast hub, and I'm the site head for our San Diego site, where we site that's overseen by Alexandria. So it's great that they're an important part of this meeting today. Lilly's become engaged with the Alliance of Socal Innovation, and are looking forward to partnering moving forward. So that's a great thing. And in my conversations with Andy, I've been telling him a little bit of the story about how we've become engaged with what is the biggest healthcare crisis of our lifetime, the COVID pandemic, and some of our efforts over the last 6 months. It's an ongoing story, and he thought it might be interesting for me to share a little bit about how we reacted to the pandemic and some of the measures we've taken. So I'm happy to do some of that today. I'm just going to quickly move through the safe harbor statement, and then start off with just this quote from our CEO David Ricks. Lilly's purpose to make life better has never been more important. I think this is a very unique time for the planet. We've all been profoundly affected by the COVID pandemic. For those of us in pharmaceuticals and biotech and innovation in various areas. I think everyone has been turning their collective brainpower to how can we help plan get out of this healthcare crisis. And I'll tell you a little bit about what Lilly's done, both from the scientific innovation standpoint, but also from the standpoint of protecting our employees and so forth. So some of the, I think the themes I'll cover today, in terms of our response to COVID-19 are some of the critical things we've had to do is, Lilly is obviously a world leader in many therapeutic areas, including diabetes. So we had to keep our supply of medicines ongoing. And I'm going to move this down to the screen so I'm not looking away from all of you. So we had to keep our supply of medicines safe, that supply chain intact. Obviously, we've got thousands of employees around many sites globally, have to keep our employees safe, as well as support our communities. But then what could we do to attack the pandemic? And that'll be sort of the discussion of the bulk of my presentation. What was it possible for a company like Lilly to do in the face of a totally new virus and disease? So in terms of sort of the core responsibilities, in terms of supplying our medicines, we currently supply medications to approximately 40 million people across 125 countries. So it was really important that we could keep our manufacturing sites, and we have 14 of them, globally, keep those operating throughout the pandemic, and obviously keep our flow of medicines and supplies moving. And that's been a heroic effort. And I think we feel very, very good about the fact that we've been able to keep the medications coming to our existing patients. In terms of our employees, more than 20,000 employees are now working from home. But we do have some folks working on site. And I'll talk to you specifically about the site that I had, the San Diego site. I think the COVID pandemic started to come on all our radar in late January, February. And Lilly was one of the first companies to actually shut down our site at the very start of March. And very quickly, we moved the bulk of our team to a working from home environment. But there was a select few small group of employees who actually kept working at the site because, as I'll tell you in a minute, we undertook a task to try and develop a medicine or a neutralizing antibody against the virus. And so it was really critical that we had good protective measures for all our employees who continued to work in our facilities. Now, one interesting thing I think that happened at Lilly was we have great diagnostic. We're not a diagnostic company, but we have excellent science in terms of developing diagnostics to support our overall clinical research. And very soon after the pandemic started, it was clear that, and of course all of you are aware of this, that the ability to test patients who are potentially infected with COVID was a big deficit, I think, across the country and even across the world. And Lilly saw that, and I think in the state of Indiana, where our headquarters are, we repurposed our diagnostic testing lab to try and actually provide testing not only for our employees but for the broader community. So within 3 weeks, we quickly established our testing assays, which are, I think, now some of the most rigorous that are out there, and set up a drive-through testing facility. We were the only U.S. pharmaceutical company to do this. And essentially what we did was we tested over 60,000 samples, and almost that many patients. Obviously, some patients got more than one test over time. With the drive-through testing site, good coordination with hospitals in Indiana and the Indiana State Department of Health. At one time point, Lilly was doing about half the tests in the state of Indiana. So that was, I think, a great example of taking some of our scientific expertise and trying to help the community. It was a really, really great story. Now, having said that, now I'll move on to the, our response to the COVID-19 in terms of how could we, attack the pandemic beyond providing testing, and how could we turn our research and development machine towards the COVID pandemic. Now, one thing that emerged quickly early in the COVID pandemic was that this was a viral infection. There was a subset of patients who were getting very ill and had potentially had a very severe inflammatory disease. I mentioned that I'm the head of immunology inflammation at Lilly. So it became apparent early on that some of the existing therapies we had for other diseases could be repurposed for COVID, and I'll talk about a couple of those in a moment. But at early March, and I again give credit to Dave Ricks, our CEO, and Dan Skorvonsky, our president of R&D. Early in March, I think Lilly looked in the mirror and said, what can we do to help with this infectious disease crisis? And Lilly had this very long history of innovation in infectious disease. When the first polio vaccine was developed by Jonas Salk, Lilly was the company who actually implemented the production and distribution of the polio vaccine. So that was a great moment many, many decades ago. And some of the critical antibiotics over history, including some of the very early cephalosporins and vancomycin, which for the clinicians on the line will be aware how important that is, and many of you will be. That was in our distant history, but this was no longer a core area for the company. So what we tried to do is capitalize on our current areas of expertise, which included biotechnology, antibody discovery and development, a lot of which actually happens at our San Diego site. We're really largely responsible for production of antibodies for the entire company across therapeutic areas, not just immunology. And we do that in collaboration with a lot of colleagues at other sites, including Indianapolis. With great capabilities in manufacturing, as I touched on earlier. And then immunology, could some of our immunology assets be relevant for a disease that starts off as a viral infection, but ultimately morphs into something that's maybe involves our own immune system attacking itself? That, I think the understanding of the pathophysiology continues to evolve. I've already talked to you about how we repurposed our labs at headquarters for diagnostic testing, but we looked at our internal pipeline in terms of what we could take into the clinic. And then we began a very exciting journey about taking neutralizing antibodies into the clinic. So the two main medicines we repurposed, I'll be quick here in the interest of time, was our baricitinib or Olumiant, which is our globally approved drug for rheumatoid arthritis. It inhibits JAK kinases, and it has some theoretical potential for blocking the inflammation associated with COVID. So we very early moved this into a collaborative trial with the NIH or the NIAID called ACT-2. This is a phase 3 trial looking at the efficacy of baricitinib. Now, the first trial that the NIH conducted was ACT-1, and this was the trial that tested remdesivir and demonstrated efficacy for remdesivir. So as we were about to start ACT-2, the information about remdesivir came out, and we adapted our trial with the thought that this is a trial in hospitalized patients. Everybody should, from an ethical standpoint, get remdesivir. So everybody in our trial got remdesivir, and then you either got a control placebo or you got baricitinib. And the bolded bullet is actually fresh news. We issued a press release yesterday morning that the trial was successful, and baricitinib in combination with remdesivir was
AJ,
able to...
we're still on, I think, slide 4. I'm not sure we're tracking.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have it on 8. Not sure why it's... It said, oh, no, is it back now?
It is, yeah.
Okay, there was a note, the screen sharing was paused, and I don't know why that happened. But the bolded bullet again shows that we announced a top-line successful results for the baricitinib trial yesterday. So we're looking closely at the data in collaboration with the NIH and deciding where to go with this. Obviously, there will be discussions about a potential EUA for this, but those discussions are underway. We also have a separate phase 3 confirmatory study ongoing with baricitinib. So this was a great example of repurposing an existing medicine for COVID with positive outcomes. And this was very fresh news as of yesterday. Now, we've repurposed a second antibody against angiopoietin-2. This is really designed to help patients with acute respiratory distress syndrome, because this is a therapeutic target that could theoretically block some of the leakiness in the lungs for the patients who are admitted to the hospital. And that trial is ongoing right now. But the part I want to really talk about towards the end is what we did with new COVID treatments. And please let me know if you lose my screen sharing again, because I've just moved it back onto the screen where I can see it easier. And what we decided to do was, with our skill in developing antibodies, and
I'm seeing a squeezed image. I'm wondering, it just...
Is that better?
That's better, yeah, thank you.
I'll just apologize for the audience, so they'll be sort of looking to my top right here. But we basically decided in early March to pursue antibody therapies, and we collaborated with the NIH We also collaborated with two companies, Apcelera, which is a biotech company in Vancouver, British Columbia, and a Chinese company, Junshi Biosciences. And we identified essentially from the blood of recovered COVID patients, some of the best antibodies directed against the virus. And the first antibody, which is in the third bullet, LY-CoV555, we moved at lightning speed. And this was a case of, as I'll show you in a minute, of our teams across the spectrum working hard. But we were really proud that from little more than 2 months from the conception of the idea, we were able to move this antibody from idea to the clinic on May 29th, 2020. We also moved along the other antibody, which is LY-CoV16, and that both of these studies have completed phase 1 studies and are in some important late-stage studies that I'll tell you more about. But I'll quickly show you just a couple of images that I think capture some of the important moments. And basically, on the left, you see the picture of the Lilly Biotechnology Center in San Diego. It's an Alexandria property. It's a beautiful building, and we moved into this around 3 years ago. As soon as we decided we wanted to make an antibody across COVID, this is where a lot of the work took place under the tutelage of the biotechnology group led by my colleague Judonia, and folks were working night and day for 2 months to make this happen, and really went through close to 500 antibodies from a recovered COVID patient and found what we think is the very best antibody that's been identified so far to potentially treat COVID patients, and that's this antibody LY-CoV555. The picture on the right is a picture of May 29th, 2020, which was a really proud day. This is the corporate jet hangar at Indianapolis Airport, and you see a lot of my team members and from the manufacturing side of things wheeling out boxes of drug to be shipped to sites. And then this was a case that we took every resource of the company and availed it. So 2 corporate jets was standing by, and on May 29, 2020, flew drugs simultaneously to both coasts. One drug went to New York City NYU Hospital, and another plane went to Los Angeles to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. And it was a really momentous day as patients were dosed at both those sites that very day. So that was an exciting way to kick off this development program. And where we are now is we already have a good amount of data from those first studies, which included hospitalized patients, that really showed that the drug seemed to be safe and well tolerated. And it allowed us to move into bigger studies. And now we're in a number of bigger studies, which include studies in the ambulatory population. So we're conducting a very big study in the ambulatory population of patients who were recently diagnosed with the virus and who have some symptoms. So they have COVID disease. And the goal of treating these patients with antibody is not only to show that we can reduce the levels of virus as we can measure them, but also to potentially show we can reduce the rates that those patients go to the hospital. And this trial is ongoing, and we're in the process of very close to getting some data from this trial actually. So that's a very exciting time. We're also doing a collaborative study with Operation Warp Speed and the NIH called Active 2, which also studies a similar patient population of COVID patients in the outpatient setting. A very interesting, I'm going to come back to the post-exposure prophylaxis in a sec because I've got a nice picture to show you, but we're continuing to study the hospitalized patients where there's the highest unmet need and the highest morbidity and mortality. And we're doing this collaboratively with the NIH and Operation Warp Speed in a study called Active 3. And this study is now underway globally. So that's a very important study. This post-exposure prophylaxis study was triggered by our observation, and I think everyone's familiar with this, that a lot of the morbidity and mortality for COVID in the first few months was in settings like nursing homes, where you have high-risk patients, elderly patients, and once the virus took hold in those settings, it spread quickly, and there was a lot of morbidity and mortality. So we worked closely with the NIH and said, what can we do to address this issue, but also to study whether the drug is efficacious. And so therefore we undertook a study in long-term care facilities, which includes a lot of nursing homes. And we identified a large number, hundreds of nursing homes across the country where we could potentially intervene. But the tricky thing was how to do the study. And what we did was we've created a study where in any of these nursing homes, if there is a confirmed outbreak of COVID or of at least positive infection with the virus, we quickly mobilize a research unit to those nursing homes and dose as many patients as we can with our antibody. We also dose some with a control placebo, just so we can establish the safety and efficacy of the drug. And this was a bit of a technical and innovation challenge how we did this, but what we did was I'm just hoping the slide will move. We have about 20 of these retrofitted RVs where we've really converted them into mobile research units, which include refrigerators, tissue culture hoods, or hoods anyway, for sterile preparation of medicine. So we've mobilized these RVs as we hear about outbreaks. They go to the sites, and we have a couple of them going, and we can actually prepare drug and dose patients as quickly as possible. And so this study is ongoing, and we'll hope to be able to show that not only treating patients with confirmed infection, but we can also prevent spread in nursing homes and prevent infection or prevent disease in those patients. So, sorry, I know I went at a whirlwind pace there, but that's a little bit about what we've been doing at Lilly. In COVID, it's a shared responsibility across the industry and with government and academia, and it's a great collaboration. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Nirula. That was amazing, and we're so proud of the work that you and your team have done at Lilly to respond to unprecedented healthcare crisis. Let's see, I have a simple question for you. The first one is, will you make these slides available at some point to the audience?
I'll have to check on that one. I'm not sure I can do that right now, but hopefully we can in the near future.
Okay. Another question came in is, there are a number of organizations and pharmaceutical companies working on similar kind of therapies and vaccines. How do you benchmark your approach and what Lilly has done relative to what's going on globally? Is there a consistent approach, or is there kind of a diverse set of activities, and how would you differentiate what you're doing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's sort of a landscape question. So the first thing in March we decided was that we're not going to develop vaccines. Vaccines are going to be the ultimate thing that get us out of this pandemic. And there are a number of companies who are really good at doing that, the companies like the Pfizers and AstraZenecas of the world. And we decided that we would let them do their thing and focus on the vaccines. But we were realistic that vaccines would probably not come along till much later this year, or maybe next year sometime. So we wanted to create some available therapies before that. And so that what we did is we, as I said, focused on existing drugs, and then we also focused on antibody therapies. And antibody therapies have been a big focus across the industry. We're one of close to 30 companies who, or maybe even be larger number by then, who are making antibodies. And it's very collaborative. We are sharing information with the other companies. Once we have data that emerges from our trials, we will share it with the other companies to help guide their clinical trial design and so forth. This is a global health crisis, a humanitarian crisis, and we'll plan to share as much as we can. And we already are sharing insights as we go along. The NIH Active Trials that I alluded to are pretty interesting because they're designed as platform trials where multiple companies can put their drugs into the trial and they can be compared side by side. And so there'll be a lot of different antibody therapies, some other therapies that go into those active trials. We worked very fast, and we were the first drug in both of those platform trials run by Operation Warp Speed. But right about now, other companies' drugs are coming into the studies.
Can you give us a sense? I know it's not a exact science, but when do you think any of these therapies will be broadly available to the healthcare system?
Yeah, there are obviously there's some unknowns there, and we in the COVID environment, I think all of you are familiar that it's a little different than traditionally where you seek a classic NDA or BLA approval. I think we have this, because this is such a crisis, we have the emergency use authorization in the United States. We have similar mechanisms in other countries globally. We know some medicines like remdesivir have already been approved initially as an EUA and then later approved more formally. And so I think the hope is that as soon as we have data that provides evidence of benefit There will be a discussion about EUA. It just depends how compelling the data is, but at least we can get, potentially get something to patients as soon as possible. But I think there would still be efforts to really develop a very, an even more powerful data set for a more formal approval. So it's going to be a judgment call between the companies, the government, the FDA, as to whether the data set constitutes a appropriate level of evidence for an emergency use authorization. Theoretically, just because of the big need, as soon as you get data from trials like this, if the data is very compelling, you would hope you could move very quickly within a period of weeks to an EUA.
Well, I do want to be mindful of our time. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being part of our work at the Alliance. It's exciting to have such incredible science going on here in San Diego and Southern California. I know everyone here today wishes you and your team the best of luck and great success as you continue to move forward these multiple activities to help address really a global health crisis. So Ajay, thank you tons for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was very kind of you to invite me today, and thanks again.